What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason, Joe, and Crams are here. Today, going to talk about a hot button issue. We touched upon it briefly in the album ranking video. Be sure to go check out that video if you haven't seen it yet, as well as all of our other recent Rolling Stones content. But it's the age-old question: Beatles versus Stones. Who you like more? Who do you think's better? I don't know that these bands are even that comparable, but you know, they were linked together early in their careers, and this question just never dies. So we, as people who talk about music on the internet, we have to answer it. So I think people know where I'm going. I think people know where Cram's going, especially if they saw that first video. Joe may be the wild card here. Not sure. He likes the Beatles a lot, but he also does get pretty annoyed when I talk about them. So
Well, the question never dies, and neither does Keith. And the Beatles just die all the time. So point to the Stones.
Case closed. I think most people pick the Beatles over the Stones as far as just like greatness. When VH1 did their big thing, Beatles, Stones number two. I think in most, rankings of the greatest bands of all time, Beatles, one, Stones, two, three, whatever. They're always a step behind. They came after the Beatles. Their first hit was a Beatles song that, well, not a Beatles song, but it was written by McCartney and Lennon. You know, it seemed like their management was sort of like, they were the bad boy Beatles, but, they had many like similarities in their album covers and just, the way they were marketed, sort of like, this is the new Beatles. This is Beatles part two. We want to be the Beatles with them again. And so they were always kind of in their shadow a little bit, but you know they lasted a lot longer. They're still going, a lot more albums, a lot more styles, I would say. They ran the gamut. It's the 60s, then they did the 70s thing, whereas the Beatles, they did a lot in a short period of time, but they didn't have those 70s and 80s and 90s experiences. I mean, as far as like the greatness of a band, what do you do? It's sort of like the Hall of Fame argument. Do you take the short period of time with the incredible stats, or do you take, the long career where they shone in every decade and had, something to contribute in every decade? And I think that's what it comes down to. Before we did the Stones deep dive, I would say the Beatles in a route. Now I think it's a lot closer just because of that variety. And the Stones had just so much stuff, the singles, the albums, the different genres they got into. It's tough. It's pretty close for me now. I don't know if I should give away. I still would probably take the Beatles just because greatness, and Rolling Stones had just had too many stinkers along the way, too many clunkers. The Beatles, they burned out quick, but they were white hot basically the whole time. So I'd give it to the Beatles, but I don't think it's, as much of a route as I would have said in the past. And I think it's pretty close. You could go either way. I wouldn't be mad if you said you prefer the Stones.
so this argument of like, yeah, they lasted longer though, but like how much of that was great? I think the Stones were only truly, truly great for a small window of time, 68 to 73, and then for a brief moment again in 78. And pretty much everything else, I don't know, especially the early stuff, listening through this time, I was kind of struck by how weak those are as albums. Yes, they have a lot of great singles, a lot of great songs. And if you pull all those great songs together, you end up with a really strong collection of tunes. But as albums, I don't think they made anything that was like front to back amazing until, I don't know, like Let It Bleed, even. So for me, I don't know. And then, I mean, I would take solo Beatles over 70s Stones, even. So it's not even close for me.
It's not close for me either. It's the Stones by a long shot. I mean, you give points to the Beatles for being first, being monumentally important. They're the most important pop and rock band of all time. They're more interesting. They're more creative, but the Stones just are. I like everyone in the Stones as a player more than the Beatles, except for probably McCartney's probably the better bass player. But I think Mick is by far the best singer of any of them. Joe said it in the video. He's got an everyman quality. I don't think you get that really with the Beatles at all. That might be an American difference too. I mean, to someone in England, it might be like they're all everymen, but I don't get it. But I get it from Mick. Um, yeah, I just have a lot more fun with the Stones. I think they have way more better songs, and the argument that they don't have like any greatness past that, I think all of their stuff after 1974 is better, or 1977 or whatever, after Some Girls 78 on. They have much better stuff than Paul McCartney does, for sure. And George probably. And like, even if their albums weren't great, which I think they have great albums after that. I love Tattoo You and Steel Wheels, and I think Voodoo Lounge is solid. They were still just an amazing live act. I like Keith Richards' guitar playing more than anything in the Beatles. I think they're a better rock group. I also think the better, I like a lot of their hits in the mid and early 60s more than the Beatles. I just don't like the Beatles as much as everyone else does. Obviously, I think they're awesome, but like, I don't think Revolver or Rubber Soul are 5-star albums. I think Aftermath is a 5-star album, start to finish. I do not feel that way about that era of the Beatles. Like, sorry, everything on Aftermath is better than Taxman, like by far. Like, there's 95 Rolling Stone songs I like more than Drive My Car. I just think the Beatles are overrated. I really do. And like I said in the video, the Beatles impress me. They charm me. They delight me. But the Stones get me completely involved. I'm in my body. I lose myself. I can rock out with them. I have fun with them. And then they get the touching side with so many songs. You know, I also just prefer that they have much more of a visceral edge to them than the Beatles. Main thing I hate about Paul McCartney is that wide-eyed, doughy coyness that he did at the beginning, where he's always looking at the camera. Like, it's basically like the first Taylor Swift, where he's just like, "Look at me, I need all the attention." That was a shot at so many things that I don't really mean, but I'm going with it. But yeah, I dig the Stones vibe a lot more. The Stones I gave 2 5-star albums to. The only 5-star albums I have by the Beatles are Abbey Road and the White Album, which are awesome. But like, Jason's dishing out 5 stars, like please, like, pleased to meet me and all that, and all their early stuff. I don't see it. I really don't. Like, I think there is just kind of this dogma that like, if it's the Beatles, it's amazing. Like, AI could create a Beatles song that was just uncovered, and people would just be like, "That's the Beatles. It's the best thing I've ever heard. We're so lucky." And it's like, it's fake, by the way, just so you know. But it's just, yeah, the Stones are awesome. The Stones are messy. Also, there has to be something to be said that the Stones stuck together. The Beatles had like one little fight, and we're like, "Let's break up." Like, so annoying. Also, Charlie Watts, way better of a drummer than Ringo.
No, not even close. No, I like Charlie Watts. I think he's a great drummer. I'm not trying to bash Charlie, but no.
And I'm not trying to bash the Beatles, but if I'm taking the
You're
argument,
trying to bash the Beatles. Get out of here. That was
a lot of stuff that you've
been
needing to get off your chest for a long time, and you finally got
okay,
to do it.
They are so overrated. They are hugely important and they're awesome. But the argument that like no one comes close to the Beatles, it's just silly. Come on.
No one comes close to the Beatles. And
That's
you
so
you
stupid.
making people like you making this argument are why I would argue that the Beatles are underrated. Nobody should be talking like this. It's crazy.
Underrated.
Underrated.
Come on.
And it's your fault.
Ugh.
What's my favorite Stone song? Heartbreaker? Wouldn't even crack my top 100 favorite Beatles songs.
That wouldn't crack my top 100 Stone songs.
Crazy. I don't know where we go from here. I think we have to dissolve the channel now.
You guys are both nuts. Just totally crazy. I mean, I knew you guys were like all in on your, Jason with his Beatles, Kramser with the Stones, but I didn't realize the gulf was so wide. And you guys are a little crazy. Top 100 Beatles songs, all better than the Rolling Stones. one of the more ridiculous things I've ever heard in my life. But Crams are only having 2 5-star Beatles albums. Revolver not being 5 stars. That's hard to hear, but I don't know.
There's a couple pretty crummy Beatles songs like Dizzy Miss Lizzie and Revolution #9 and stuff like that. But all of the other like good songs, there's like maybe 10 or 12 songs like that I would put below Heartbreaker, but everything else I like more.
There's also something to be said about the way I connect to music. You get one brand and stamp of the Stones with, that Mick leading Keith's kind of vision dynamic. The Beatles, you get just a big cloud, a menagerie of ideas coming from 3 very different human beings, which are all awesome. But that, for me personally, it makes me harder to be like, oh, this is me, Crams, are listening to the Beatles. When I listen to the Beatles, I'm like, here's John, here's George, here's Paul. And I know for some people that's part of like the beauty of it. But for me, like, I want the one-on-one aspect of me and the Stones. I don't get that with the Beatles, really.
Good point. Interesting point. They don't really feel like a band after Revolver, probably.
I
Even
think
before that.
I generally gravitate towards bands with multiple singers. I really like, stuff like The Band, like things coming at you from different directions and making that feel cohesive and working as a unit.
I will say, album v album, I'm taking the Beatles. Song versus song, I'm probably taking the Stones. Give Me Shelter, I think, is better than any Beatles song that I've heard. Maybe not better, but I like it better. It beat out Something in 1969 for my song of the year, which is my favorite Beatles song. So maybe I'm just tired of the Beatles too. I've listened to them a lot more than the Stones, and the Stones are a little bit newer and fresher to me. So I don't know.
At their peak, any era, the best they've ever been, who would you rather see live?
Live? Do the Beatles even are they even a live band? Beatles were a studio creation. That's the thing holding
Thank
them back,
you.
always in my
Thank
mind.
you. Come on. That's huge. That's huge to me.
I would take the Beatles still.
Jason, say 5 negative things about the Beatles.
This argument of like them being a better live band though doesn't hold that much water for me. Like how often are we seeing these bands live? It doesn't matter. If I was able to see each band every week and just constantly go see them live, then that argument matters to me. But I've never seen either band live, so I don't care. Albums are forever. Albums matter.
As our Discord would say, Jason has album brain.
Yeah, that's because, no. Yikes. Who would you rather hang out with?
Beatles.
We're not asking you anymore. It's just the Beatles would be the Beatles.
That's an interesting question. I like that one. I think
if you guys hung out with the Stones, you would end up dead in a week.
Be a hell of a
exactly.
week. Be a great.
And yet the Stones live and the Beatles die. So come on.
These would be very tense, I think. Getting like John, because Yoko would be there, and it would just be like awkward the whole time.
I mean, Linda sucks, Yoko sucks. You got the George and Clapton thing going. Like, it's just a big old mess. It's no good.
Ringo would be sweet though. I'd hang with Ringo.
They based the character in Pirates of the Caribbean off of Keith Richards. No one's doing that with Ringo Starr. Come on, get out of here. And I'm pretty sure that Bruce Willis based his character in Die Hard off Charlie Watt. Nah, I made that up, but they're both bald.
All right. Let us know what side of the argument you fall on. Drop it in the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.